Drones are the future. This is a drone war, really.
Это рабочая лошадка этой войны.
This is a workhorse of this war.
When one soldier sitting 2 kilometers away flies one drone into the sky, it performs the function of a whole reconnaissance company.
Our present for Russia.
A winter's night on the Ukrainian front line. Seen through a thermal camera, Ukrainian drone operators from our host unit, the 41st Brigade, are preparing a combat launch against Russian positions. But these hunters are also the hunted. And this is their most vulnerable time. Enemy eyes will be watching, ready to call in pinpoint retaliation. Darkness remains useful to soldiers, but only up to a point in a war that increasingly resembles science fiction.
The signature weapon of the Ukraine war is undoubtedly the drone. It's said that at any one time there might be as many as 10,000 drones in the air over the extended front line. And we're here in perhaps the most hotly contested drone warfare sector. You can perhaps hear the artillery in the background.
Throughout history, military success has gone hand in hand with technological innovation. Today, another relatively new weapon has come to dominate the battlefield here in Ukraine, changing the face of war forever. That weapon is the drone. A drone is a guided aircraft without an onboard pilot. They're sometimes called unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs. But let's just call them drones. In the war above Ukraine, drones come in all shapes and sizes and perform a number of different roles, like the giant Turkish-designed Bayraktar that helped stem the initial Russian invasion, the Iranian Shahed suicide drones that have been launched in waves against Ukrainian cities, or the Chinese-made Mavic 3 recreational drones, which you can hold in the palm of your hand and have been adapted by both sides to hunt and kill. Military adaptations of these civilian models, which cost less than £2,000, can destroy a main battle tank worth many millions. Over the course of this last year, male cameraman Jamie Wiseman and I have been exploring as well as experiencing the drone phenomenon, spending time with frontline drone units, talking to soldiers about the Russian drone threat, and visiting a factory where one of the most sophisticated Ukrainian UAVs is being produced. Only on the front line, though, can you truly understand the respect, if not fear, that the drone threat now commands. We too have been targeted by Russian drones. The first occasion occurred last summer when entering a Ukrainian trench at night. You can hear the drone hovering directly over our heads. The next day, Russian drones were spotting for their artillery as we left the front line under shell fire. We were lucky. Since then, the importance of drone warfare has only increased. The numbers that are being deployed by both sides at any one time are extraordinary. In this film, we will consider where the technology race between military drones might be heading. We're already witnessing drones fighting drones, and soldiers surrendering to the machines. Could the development of artificial intelligence and machine learning see humans largely replaced on the battlefield? Or are we about to enter an even more dystopian era in which clever AI drones can, quite independent of human control, identify, pursue, and kill enemy soldiers? But first, let's examine how we got this far. By the start of World War I, European militaries had recognized the potential usefulness of manned flight. Of most value was the ability to spy on the enemy from above. The help these eyes in the sky could give in correcting artillery fire and spotting enemy troop movements was unprecedented. But such early reconnaissance aircraft were slow, easy to spot, and vulnerable to attack by enemy fighters that started to appear in 1915. They were shot down in droves. Each recon plane usually carried 2 personnel. Parachutes were not issued. It was during the Great War that the idea of unmanned aircraft with a military application began to be explored. The first example of such a remote-controlled plane was the British aerial target of 1917. During the same conflict, the Americans also developed the Kettering Bug, the world's first flying bomb. It could carry 82 kilograms of explosive for 75 miles, guided to the target by a pneumatic electrical system aided by a gyroscope and altimeter. Neither the aerial target nor the Kettering Bug entered service. The term drone first came into use in the 1930s, possibly inspired by the name of the de Havilland Queen Bee, a large radio-controlled gunnery target based on the manned Tiger Moth aircraft. Some 400 of these were built. Attempts were made by several countries in World War II to utilize drone technology in the field of guided weapons. But it was not until the Vietnam War era and the advent of effective Soviet surface-to-air missiles that drones such as the air-launched Lightning Bug, which was developed from a gunnery target model, started to see significant combat use. Thousands of these drones were deployed over North Vietnamese territory as a means of gathering battlefield intelligence without putting at risk the lives of aviators and multi-million-dollar machines.
Once that war finished, however, interest in drone development dwindled.
It was not until the turn of the century that it was reawakened, particularly after 9/11, when US-led coalitions prosecuted conflicts in difficult terrains against local insurgencies who did not possess modern air defense systems. So dawned the era of the mega drone. Large, purpose-built combat UAVs, such as the Predator, could perform surveillance, reconnaissance, and attack missions that lasted anything up to 40 hours from takeoff to landing. They could detect the heat signature of a human being from several miles up, or launch a missile that could destroy a tank, all the while piloted from facilities thousands of miles away from the battlefield. These highly sophisticated machines did not come cheap. The Reaper, a development of the Predator which is used by the RAF, cost $32 million apiece. But a new development from an unexpected source was about to turn the world of drone warfare on its head and would have a profound effect on the war in Ukraine. The last 2 decades have seen the emergence of a recreational and commercial drone market that is now worth tens of billions of pounds. Small, mass-produced radio-controlled UAVs equipped with live-stream video cameras can be bought on the high street or online for as little as a few £100s. They are simple enough to be flown by a child. They were designed with fun or civilian business in mind. One company dominates this industry. DJI Technology Company was founded in China in 2006. By 2021, DJI had cornered more than 70% of the global drone market. By market share, it had become the Apple or Microsoft of drones. But long before then, both Russia and Ukraine realized that DJI's range of civilian drones could be adapted for military purposes. This is recent footage of a DJI Agras drone, which was designed for agricultural purposes and is able to lift 120 kilograms. Here it is practicing the evacuation of a wounded Russian soldier from a minefield. But there is another much smaller DJI model that has become the iconic weapon of this Ukrainian war, and that is the Mavic, a quadcopter that retails in the UK for less than £2,000. The Mavic is mostly used on the Ukraine battlefield for reconnaissance work. Here, a Mavic variant is being launched on a surveillance mission by a soldier from the Mail's recent host unit, the 41st Brigade. But the Mavic and other similar off-the-shelf drones have also been widely adapted to drop grenades and small bombs on enemy infantry and armored vehicles.
Это рабочая лошадка этой войны.
This is a workhorse of this war. They made a special upgrade, double battery.
We put a second battery to the up, and we made to reach up to 50 kilometers in depth.
To devastating effect. We have often encountered the Mavic 3 being operated on the Ukrainian side of the front lines.
Our present for Russia.
But the Russians are also using Mavics in great numbers. Small recreational drones like these have a limited range of around 15 kilometers and an endurance of under an hour.
They often operate at heights that make them vulnerable, even to small arms fire.
Consequently, attrition rates are very high. This Aero Scout unit of the Border Guards told us they had once lost 10 such machines in a single day. But when a drone is shot down, no pilot dies, and the machines are far easier and cheaper to replace than a manned combat aircraft.
Yeah, but it's better to lose drone than life of our soldier.
Here, we are watching the Aero Scouts correct artillery fire onto Russian positions in the town of Marianka via an iPad linked to the drone camera.
The shell is in the air right now.
И мы ждем на разрыв.
And we are waiting for explosion.
This is another of the drones in the Aeroscout's arsenal. It is a homemade kamikaze model with an RPG warhead, ratcheted by plastic tape to a Mavic-type machine. The same unit also operates the Ukrainian-designed and produced Vampire heavy attack drone. It is big and powerful enough to carry and drop an anti-tank mine repurposed as a bomb. These larger machines are less expendable than the Mavics. Here, a crashed BAT heavy attack drone of the 41st Brigade is being retrieved under artillery fire from no man's land only 400 meters from the Russian trenches. The Russians call such drones Baba Yaga, after the flying witch from Slavic folklore. This is what a hit from such a witch can do to one of their tanks. But there is a more recent drone development that has taken this war to another terrifying dimension. FPV stands for First Person View. An FPV drone is a form of loitering munition, a kamikaze flying bomb that is crashed into a target by its operator. The first military FPVs were adaptations of racing drones, with small explosives attached. Now they are being purpose-built in their hundreds of thousands. Unlike a standard recreational drone, such as the Mavic, which has a stabilization system that enables it to hover as the operator views its camera footage on a tablet, an FPV drone is flown like a combat jet. The pilot sees only what his drone camera sees, in real time, via a video headset. They're not easy to fly. In the Ukrainian military, FPV pilots have to pass various tests, similar to those undergone by prospective military jet pilots. This is Daniel. He used to be a travel agent. Today he supervises flying bombs rather than package holidays. An FPV drone can cost as little as $300, but in trained hands, it is a deadly weapon. An FPV kamikaze can be flown fast and accurately into the smallest of targets, such as through the open hatches of an enemy armored vehicle, or even against individual soldiers. That is the stuff of nightmares. This is a new type of FPV that explodes before contact like a cluster bomb. Bigger kamikaze drones that can hit targets up to 30 kilometers behind Russian lines are now being used as artillery substitutes due to the lack of shells, which is why FPV pilots have themselves become prime targets. This is footage of a Ukrainian HIMARS strike against an FPV pilot school in occupied Donetsk in January. Several dozen students were reportedly killed. This film shows the reported assassination in Kherson province of a famous Russian FPV ace, callsign Moses, who was located and killed by a rival Ukrainian drone unit. I know from personal experience the chilling effect of the heavy drone presence along the front line. We spoke to a number of Ukrainian soldiers about fighting in that environment. Victor is a doctor in the 56th Brigade.
Drones are very disruptive, and in Bakhmut, we conducted medical evacuations only at night. Sometimes, only if there was a very seriously injured person, we took a risk.
Sasha is a self-propelled howitzer gunner of the 41st Brigade. In a concealed position in the Kupiansk front line, his vehicle is protected against kamikaze drones by a heavy mesh net. Drones remain the greatest threat to his survival.
Drones are the future. This is a drone war, really. Previously, a tank was the main fighting fist that broke through defences. Now, tanks are only used as artillery. They can't just ride out and shoot directly anymore. They shoot from afar. Because a drone costing only $1,000 will fly, immobilise the tank, and then a second one will finish it off. That's it.
Kos, a company commander in the 56th Brigade, agrees.
A drone is basically a civilian camera that flies to film a wedding or a parachute jump, some tourist trip, etc. But when one soldier sitting 2 kilometers away flies one drone into the sky, it performs the function of a whole reconnaissance company. Drones are the business card of this war because they turned the field manual and the approach to hostilities upside down.
Air defense missiles and small arms fire are only the last kinetic line of defense against the drones before they hit the target. The most effective countermeasure is electronic interference. In other words, the jamming of the signals that send the drones to their targets. Russia is the master of anti-drone electronic warfare.
Electronic warfare systems have been developed that jam the signal. We also have a person who jams. And we have a device on a tripod that jams a certain sector by 60 degrees so that the drone cannot fly closer than 2 kilometers to us. This is how we counteract this. But they invent something new, and at the same moment, we come up with some kind of counteraction.
It seems to me that the quicker one side invents a drone, the quicker the other side will come up with electric warfare jamming, and vice versa, and it will continue forever. Initially, a Mavic drone was used. They would take off, everything is fine. Now, Mavic simply cannot take off at 15 feet. It will simply hit a tree and burn because the electronic warfare is working.
But there is another very different drone war being fought over Ukraine at a far greater altitude and much farther behind Russian lines.
We're in a top-secret facility somewhere in Ukraine. What you see here is the production line for a state-of-the-art drone that is achieving extraordinary results over the front line.
The drone is called the Raybird 3, and it was designed and developed here in Ukraine by Skyton. We've been asked to blur the faces of the workers for security reasons.
It is claimed that the Raybird 3 can fly higher, faster and longer than any other UAV in its class.
Raybird 3 has a top speed of 180 km per hour, a maximum altitude of more than 2.5 kilometers, and can operate for more than 30 hours in all weathers, from temperatures of minus 30 degrees centigrade to plus 50. It also possesses tremendous range and surveillance capability. We're told, for example, that a Raybird could be flown from Kyiv to Munich, record what a particular man in a street there was reading on his iPhone, and return to Kyiv. But these operational figures and abilities would be redundant if the Raybird, with its 3-meter wingspan, did not have exceptional survivability. Raybirds have flown up to 160 kilometers behind enemy lines without interception. One model has completed more than 80 missions over Russian-controlled territory. They are the eyes of the HIMARS and other very long-range rocket artillery systems.
It's a different war.
Different war, so it depends on what the distance they fighting with each other. With the small drones, they are fighting like in the games, and I know a lot of people, soldiers, they are really addicted with this.
The Raybird, which costs around $250,000 a drone, has built-in resilience against signal jamming and other electronic countermeasures that baffle less sophisticated drones.
To fly in electronic warfare conditions, really heavy jamming, so we can fly there and we can recognize exact objects.
Raybird's fuselage and wings are built of fiberglass materials that give it a very small radar cross-section, particularly compared to such models as the Bayraktar. New variants will have electric engines fueled by hydrogen, which will emit a lower heat signature than petrol-driven models. The makers claim that the Raybird's stealthy qualities make it all but invisible to Russian anti-aircraft radars. Recorded by a Raybird's camera, this is the moment that a Buk, one of Russia's most powerful air defense systems, launches against the drone high over Donbass and misses. Earlier this month, a photograph of a crashed Raybird 3 was posted on Russian social media. It had reportedly come down while on a secret mission over the Krasnodar region of Russia, almost 200 kilometers behind the front line. The Raybird has a far better chance of survival than an ordinary drone or combat aircraft. Operator survivability is also taken into account. A Raybird can be assembled for launch on its crossbow frame within 20 minutes of arriving at a location. The apparatus can also be disassembled within 2 minutes of that launch. This is vital because the Russians are constantly looking to locate and kill drone operators with artillery fire. The most commonly used device by the Russians to detect drone launches is the aeroscope, built by DJI, the makers of the Mavic series. Artificial intelligence is a growing presence in drone warfare technology. It could dominate its future. Skyton has developed an onboard AI system so that Raybird can identify targets by itself No need for an operator to be glued to the screen for hours on end, with potential loss of concentration. The latest Raybird is also the first to be armed with a bomb. Man will literally be taken out of the equation in this very 21st century hunter-killer machine. The skies over Ukraine are ever more crowded with combat drones. Here, the drone of the 41st Brigade flying a recon mission along the Russian front line records another drone on another mission passing beneath it. The EU has said it will provide Ukraine with 1 million new drones. The Ukrainian military is establishing a separate drone command. One thing is certain, in the age of the killer drone, nobody is safe. What you're watching is the aftermath of a kamikaze drone strike on a Ukrainian army pickup truck. The soldier filming this on GoPro is our old friend, Oleg. He and his colleague were sitting in the Mitsubishi when the first drone hit it. Moments later, the vehicle was struck by a second drone. Astonishingly, both men survived the attack unscathed. And the incident would provide a further incredible twist, as we will see. This is Oleg, and this is the story of his remarkable luck. Whether it's good luck or bad luck, you can decide. Since the Russian invasion of 2022, he's been wounded twice and had a number of near misses. This close shave took place during the Russian siege of Bakhmut. A shell fragment strikes the trench wall where Oleg had been standing only seconds before. And this artillery round almost spills more than his morning coffee. We first met Oleg the day after he was released from hospital, having lost part of his ear to shrapnel. He took us to the town of Chasiv Yar near Bakhmut, which was under shell fire at the time. As you can see, he led the way in his trademark ride, a 4x4 pickup. Such vehicles are rugged and reliable, ideal for his kind of military work. But they're also soft-skinned and vulnerable to any kind of gun or shell fire, or FPV drone. One night last summer, we travelled in another of Oleg's pickups to a frontline position near Le Mans. The driver used night vision equipment rather than headlights, as we were so close to the Russian lines. This was when we had our first experience of the growing Russian drone threat. As we entered a trench line, an enemy drone could be heard hovering directly overhead. The following morning, as we left the trench, Russian drones were out again, spotting for their artillery. Oleg had hidden his truck inside a thicket. For a horrible moment, we thought we would be stuck there. Since then, the threat posed by Russian FPV kamikaze drones has increased dramatically. They are changing the face of warfare. Not even a main battle tank is safe, let alone a pickup truck. But while driving in a vehicle, you cannot see or hear a drone approach, let alone one as fast as a kamikaze FPV. On the fateful day, Oleg was using a Mitsubishi L200. Like several of his other trucks, it had been donated from the UK and was a right-hand drive model. In Britain, Mitsubishi markets this pickup as being just at home on a surf beach as a construction site. What they don't say, because perhaps they don't know, is the L200 has an astounding ability to absorb battle damage, as Oleg was about to find out. Oleg and his colleague were driving in open country just behind the front line outside the occupied city of Gorlivka. This was asking for trouble. There was no cover and they were well within enemy drone range. Oleg said he did not see the first drone before it hit the roof over the rear cargo bed. The explosion blew off the hardtop and filled the cab with broken glass and shrapnel. Oleg and his colleague were both wearing body armour and helmets. That's what saved them. They bailed out of the truck in time to see the second kamikaze drone, just before it hit their rear bumper, here, and exploded. The two soldiers lay low for half an hour, before approaching the wrecked Mitsubishi. They knew they were in serious trouble. Russian FPV drones can also target individual soldiers, and they were a long way from safety. What to do? Now, let's watch the video to its conclusion.
Давай, быстренько запрыгивай.
You can hear their heavy breathing and the stress in their voices as they examine the truck.
Дай рыбу ее.
The Mitsubishi is surrounded by its own debris.
Нет, дверь просто открою.
You can glimpse what remains of its yellow UK rear number plate. But despite the damage, and to their surprise, the engine still turns over.
Пробуй.
Полный.
Давай. Все, прыгаем. Давай.
And, even more miraculously, the Mitsubishi that had been hit twice by attack drones could still be driven away, out of the kill zone. In fact, they drove the wreck almost 30 kilometres before stopping. It was then put on a trailer and taken to their depot far behind the front line, where the possibility of repair is now being assessed. It's also the subject of some wonder, as the truck that wouldn't die. An Oleg? Lucky or unlucky, you decide.
This life or death piece of kit is a drone detector. It works by picking up the frequencies of drones, and the signal strength will give you an approximation of how far away they are. On our trip today, our military escort was carrying one of these. When a Russian drone is detected, it will start to beep. You will hear a lot of beeps on this film as a Russian reconnaissance drone flew over our vehicle, and then as we were pulling out, an enemy kamikaze drone close to within maybe about a mile of our vehicle as we were driving along the road. A lot of beeps.
This is New York, but not the one you know. This is New York, Ukraine.
Виганіть їх чортової матері, щоб я їх не бачили, цих росіян.
And in the next 24 hours, it will find itself brutally attacked and on the brink of capture by Russian forces. It's 6:15 on a midsummer morning, and we're speeding east into the rising sun with a Ukrainian Special Reconnaissance Unit towards a small city in Donetsk Oblast that shares its name with America's Big Apple. The soundtrack to our New York journey is not provided by Sinatra, but the frantic warning beeps of a little black box. The sky is clear, save for a three-quarter moon, and the Russian target acquisition drone that is closing in on our vehicles. We're a mouse under a hawk. My palms are sweating. We don't know it yet, but we're entering Ukraine's Little Apple, only hours before the Russians break through nearby Ukrainian lines and reach the city limits. Situated no more than 2 miles from no man's land, with Russian drones and artillery scouring the city and surrounding countryside, New York has become a very dangerous place to visit. With only a few hundred of the 10,000 pre-war population left here, perhaps we will be the last Western journalists to see the town as it is right now. The Russians are attempting to take the larger town of Toretsk, only 5 miles to the north. Within a month, New York will likely have been flattened like Bakhmut, we are told by our military escort. That could prove to be a conservative estimate, as you will witness in this episode. It seems that we're here to see what life in New York looks like, on the verge of Armageddon. Our reconnaissance patrol is commanded by Lieutenant Oleg, a decorated veteran. The last time he took a patrol to New York, earlier this year, this happened. His Mitsubishi pickup was hit by 2 Russian kamikaze drones. Remarkably, he and his colleagues survived the attack, and were even able to drive away. On that occasion, Oleg was not equipped with an electronic drone detector, which could have given him enough warning to take cover. On this return to New York, an important precaution is taken. The long drive into the Frontline drone zone is nerve-wracking. There is little cover, no one else on the road, and as we make the final approach to New York, our 2 vehicle convoy is picked up by a Russian drone.
the drone alarm will not stop beeping until we are well on our way back to base. And we're on the edge of the village, or the town, of New York, Ukraine, which is very close to the front line. The drone detector is buzzing and buzzing again and again. It's a beautiful morning, but these blue skies are slightly worrying. We reach the outskirts of New York. No sign of life yet. We soon find out that the New Yorkers who are left are reluctant to speak to us. We spot two ladies, one carrying a large bunch of white hydrangeas. Oleg tries to talk to them, but they tell him they don't have time. It's the first sign that people in New York are scared.
They have no time.
Oleg, it's just like the real New York. People just don't have time to talk to you. Another man refuses. I guess the last thing that the residents want is for a military presence in their town, because you know what that will bring. So everybody we've tried to speak to so far in New York has they're either too busy or they have something else to do and they can't stop. I can't really blame them. But then we come across 77-year-old Valentina as she walks along the lane. She burst into tears when we stopped to talk. She is defiant, but has had just about enough of the pressure of living in besieged New York.
Дай Бог вам здоров'я, хлопці, щоб мир у нас був. Вигнать їх чортової матері, щоб я і ми не бачили цих росіян. Ой, Господи, як воно надоїло все.
Можемо, чому ви ще тут? Чому не виїжджаєте?
Ні, зараз ми, хлопці, зараз гуманітарку не отримуємо, тому що не привозять. От. А так, а помощь, звісно, помощь треба, хлопці. І дров немає, ні угля немає, нічого немає. Ну що це нам дають? Тонну дров і куб угля. Ой, Господи, куб дров і тонну угля. Ну що це на зиму, а? Це ж мало. Та я тут з самого початку. От, постійно тут.
Ви народилися тут?
Народилася я в Очеретині, а приїхали сюди.
Чому ви не хочете виїжджати зараз, поки війна?
Очеретина.
Ну куди виїжджати? Запомніть, у мене пенсія маленька. Треба платити за квартиру, за все на світі. А куди? Як кажуть, сидіть протягнутою рукою, просить у них.
Виїжджаєте в будь-яке місто України, заходите в міську раду і вас забезпечать, ви впевнений, що вас забезпечать і житлом, і буде краще, ніж тут.
Повиїжджали, поприїжджали.
Знову повертали, так?
Валентина, Нью-Йорк.
Скажіть, будь ласка, скільки тут ще людей залишилося? Багато чи є ще люди?
Так, тут багато людей залишилося.
Quite a lot of people are still here.
Багато.
Some physical activity.
Okay,
А ви далеко?
Вибачте?
Ви звідкіля?
З Англії, з Лондону.
Ой, хлопці, у вас там гарно. Дуже гарно. Ну, ми так не будемо жити. Да, ось позавчора як гахнули гарно, а вчора та сама вообще чуємо, самоліт летить 2 рази, треба тікати.
А, бомбили, так?
Ну да, вони збрасують.
Я...
Ви знаєте, туди чи успієш, ну успієш туди пройти, але Бог його знає, як кажуть. Вона як гахне, все і криші летять, все на світі летять.
Valentina, thank you. Thank you.
Я вам дуже дякую, хлопці, дуже дякую.
I'm very grateful to you.
Да, да, що?
Take care. Take
Да.
care.
Бережіть себе, будь ласка.
Да.
Будьте обережні.
Я щиро, хлопці, живіть, здорові, кохайте, щоб у вас жінки були гарні, все. Ну, хороших вибирайте жінок. Зараз жінки, ох, дівчата бувають, дай Боже. Ну все, до свидання.
Дуже дякую вам, дуже дякую за розмову.
Щасливо вам,
До побачення.
хлопці. Ага.
We head downtown to the city hall.
Richard, graffiti. I love New York.
This is the Soviet-era cultural center of the city of New York, with its classical facade. There'd be maybe a library and various places of a theater, maybe places where people could gather for entertainment and education. Obviously, that's all ended. You can hear what I guess is Touretsk just up the road being hammered by the Russian artillery. It's a beautiful day. We cross the Sloviansk to Donetsk railway track. Here is the New York police headquarters. And New York wouldn't be New York without a deli. No, I'm going to say every New York should have a bakery or a delicatessen. And this is the bakery delicatessen of this particular New York. Unfortunately, it's closed at the moment. It may be closed for some time to come. There's a lot of artillery in the background, but it certainly looks delicious. So this is Freedom Street, New York. It's quite a short road, but there are people on it. Not everybody is prepared to talk to us. There's quite a lot of understandable nervousness about the situation and the military being here. But here we are. Sitting on a bench in a small square of boarded up shops, we find Luba. She claims to be 39 years old. I'm not so sure, but living here in New York at this time would age anyone.
Ну, це 20 років.
21 роки.
Більше 20 років, так? Да?
Ну нічого, нормально, живемо. Тікаємо, хватку, сидимо, купляємо.
It's more or less fine.
Good for you. And do you have family here?
Чого, є, ну їхали. Не хочу виїжджати, в свою родину. Україна, ми тут живемо, не хочемо виїжджати. Ну, дом у нас, квартира, і ми живемо тут. Люди роблять тут фінольні, сторож, охранники. Завод, люди виганяли, вигнали з заводу, закрили, все.
And could I ask a very rude question for a British person? How old are you, Luba?
39.
Що?
39. Говорить мені, день рождення було.
39 років вам?
Так. Ну, апреля, 20 апреля. Було мені день рождення.
Okay. Luba, thank you.
Дякую за вам за розмову.
І вам спасибо.
Бережіть себе.
Ми так бережемо. Бог нам дає.
На все добре.
Nearby, we meet Asan, thin and unkempt. He accepts a military ration pack from the soldiers and complains that he and others in New York have been abandoned. So what is it like to live in New York at this time?
Скажіть, будь ласка, як зараз вам тут живеться, як ви виживаєте?
Та нічого хорошого, плохо очень. Нічого хорошого. Капець.
А чому ви не евакуюєтеся?
А чим? Ніхто не забирає. Хто нас буде евакуювати? Кому воно треба? Хто буде приїжджати забирати нас?
Ну, а на попутках якось виїхати, в якийсь центр.
Денег нет.
Ні, просто на попутках, от військових попросити.
Та.
З волонтерами зв'язатися.
Хто согласиться, ви чого?
Чому?
Ніхто не соглашається. Так, я сколько вам пробовал. Так, кому оно надо? Если бы я возможно, то что я с удовольствием, если бы найти там более нормальные условия, а не вот эта херня вот это.
What date the big factory closed?
Только брат бы был бы, лишь бы не тут. Мне вот это, вы думаете, мне сильно вот это надо, мне вот это гамно, оно мне нафиг не надо, мне 300 лет. А тут уже ничего хорошего не будет никогда.
This is Garden Street, New York. Before Stalin, it had a German name, Gartenstrasse. Okay, we are right in the center now of New York. Behind me there's a historical cultural center, and just over here is the town church. The situation is a little tense because we have a Russian UAV overhead, a surveillance UAV. But otherwise it's a beautiful morning. You can see quite a bit of damage to the buildings. This never was like Manhattan. It's a small rural town of a few thousand people. There are some civilians still left here. But it's right on a hot front line next to the larger town of Toretsk, which is currently under attack by the Russians. Ground assault as well as air assault. You can hear the artillery in the background. This building was built by the Mennonite community more than a century ago and was recently restored. So this is probably the most historic building in this New York. The equivalent of the Empire State. More artillery. Over there we have industrial New York, which has received quite a bit of damage from shelling. This is warning against mines. This piece of graffiti reads, peace to you. Constant buzzing you can hear is Oleg's drone detector. Actually, so I am. Really excellent. The Big Apple has a number of famous churches, such as St. Patrick's Cathedral. New York and Donetsk has only one that we could find. Okay, well we're now outside the main church, perhaps the only church in New York, which is behind us. It's the Holy Spiritual Temple. It seems largely intact, although the windows in one of the towers have been blown out. And there's obviously been quite a bit of shelling inside the town here. Windows on the ground floor all boarded up, but it's got a rather beautiful garden, a rose garden. This would have once been a rather plum posting, I imagine, for some Orthodox priest, who obviously was a keen gardener. Now most of his congregation have gone, although there are still people here, we're told. I think we're at the gates of what is the local equivalent of Central Park. You see in the background behind me there is a sign, a symbol, which says "I love New York" in Ukrainian. We hear small arms fire, which is probably the sound of soldiers trying to shoot down the loitering Russian drone that has dogged us during our visit. As we return to the German house, the church clock is striking the quarter hour, competing with the artillery. It's time for the patrol to leave. The drone alarm has not ceased beeping the whole time we've been here, nor has the sound of artillery, both outgoing and incoming. We're back in the country lane that will take us to the main highway. The drone alarm is ever more frantic. Then it tells us what we don't want to hear. The protocol in these situations is straightforward. If we are the target of a kamikaze drone, the driver steers into the nearest hedge or tree line. We bail out and scatter.
FPV 3,5 кілометри від нас.
But the kamikaze doesn't get any closer. We reach the empty highway and turn for home, still 20 kilometers without cover away. Shamefully, I'm grateful when a military vehicle passes us going the other way. Better they are targets than us. The war in Ukraine has been described as the most documented in history, and this is why. The footage you see shows Russian infantry being attacked by a civilian drone adapted to carry a hand grenade. The Ukrainian drone operators call this delivering a gift.
Well, we're in the village, or what's left of the village, of Zoloto, which is on the southern Donetsk front. The Russians are on two horizons in front of me, and if you were to travel some 50 miles to the southeast, you would reach the city, or what's left of the city, of Mariupol. This is a village that has changed hands twice over the course of the war since the invasion. First, the Russians took it from the Ukrainians, then the Ukrainians took it back from the Russians, and now the Ukrainians continue to hold it. And there's still the detritus of the battles that were fought here, and some of the bodies are still lying out there in the field.
Last week, male cameraman Jamie Wiseman and I were in the critical Bakhmut sector of the front line. Heavy rains and artillery barrages and human wave Russian infantry attack had caused it to resemble a First World War battlefield. Then, all of a sudden, spring arrived and brilliant blue skies. We have travelled some 100 miles southwest to the front line along the so-called land bridge, the territory seized last year which links Russia proper to occupied Crimea. In Zoloto, every cottage is damaged or destroyed, even the little cemetery has been booby-trapped. On a dirt track beside a ruined Russian armoured personnel carrier, various items of combat detritus lie scattered. One is a black army boot. Next to it is a human thigh bone, chalky white in the sunshine. The Russians didn't retrieve their dead when they had the chance, and we didn't move them because we were afraid of booby-trap, the Ukrainian soldier tells me. War is war, but it is strange they should leave their own here, to be eaten by dogs.
А як вас звати?
Людмила.
Людмила.
Да.
Дуже приємно. Я Олександр.
Ага. Познайомилися? Ну нічого.
Not every civilian in the area has been evacuated or fled. In a nearby village we meet a pensioner with an infectious laugh called Ludmila. She is delighted to be able to speak to anyone. Why has she remained so close to the front lines when she could have been evacuated like most of her fellow residents? Recently, an 80-year-old neighbour was fatally wounded by Russian cluster munitions. I have spent all my life here, Ludmila says. I was born, baptized and lived, and now I receive my pension here. I have no relatives except my sister and brother-in-law. And he is disabled, so we cannot leave. But we have survived, and God helps us. He answers our prayers. It is quiet and calm here now, but the Russians sometimes shell. Everyone tries to calm down his or her nerves by pretending that it's just training, not a real war. She laughs. Nearby, a man is pulling a primitive harrow in preparation for planting. It is a scene that might have taken place 200 years ago, if it were not for the distant rumble of artillery. This is Corporal Denis Shamardak, who leads the border guard drone unit you saw attacking Russian troops in the previous clip. He was the manager of a commercial farm in that now deserted village of Zoloto. Now his job, and that of his men, all civilians until the invasion, is to dominate the battlefield around Mariinka from the air. Their control center is a ramshackle cottage somewhere in Donetsk. Their location must remain a secret. Drone operators are high-priority targets for the artillery of both sides. Sunlight trickles through the net curtains, picking out the faded pink of the cherry blossom wallpaper. Set out on the kitchen table are a plate of shortbread biscuits, a jar of instant coffee, and a carton of tea bag. But that is where domesticity draws a line. The scarred wooden surface is also cluttered with pineapple-shaped hand grenades, a coiled snake of plastic explosives, and what resembles a laptop that has sprouted helicopter wings. A drone. They are almost without exception off-the-shelf commercial models that his team have upgraded and modified, both in the software and hardware, to better suit their military application and survivability. They face an enemy which has far greater numbers and is deploying an array of sophisticated electronic drone countermeasures that have to be overcome. This unit might lose as many as 10 drones in one day. It is a war of attrition in the air as well as on the ground. But better to lose one drone than a single life, the corporal tells us. The infantry call us their guardian angels. And this is what their drones can do. As we watch, Corporal Shamadek is correcting artillery fire onto a Russian position on the edge of Mariinka. We are waiting for the explosion, he explains. We watched the silent, real-time footage from a drone camera on his iPad screen. From what we can see, Mariinka could not be any more ruined. In footage released this week by the Ukrainian military, you can see a complex ambush taking place in Mariinka. A Russian tank and accompanying infantry is being attacked under the control of drones from the corporal's unit. First, the tank is struck and set on fire by a missile fired by men of the 79th Air Assault Brigade. Artillery is then called down upon the accompanying troops, directed again by the drone unit. Any trip by road along the Donbass front line runs a risk of an unpleasant surprise. Here, the village of Velkya Novosika was hit by a Russian heavy mortar barrage as we approached it. As we leave at speed, the vegetation on both sides of the highway is ablaze, as are several other spots inside the shattered settlement. The road itself has been hit and is littered with shrapnel. Along the way, we pass anti-tank mines in the long grass, and a pheasant. As we leave, the Russian lines are on fire. Ukrainian drone pilots have been busy again.